Okay, hey everyone, good morning. I'm gonna do my introduction now. Just have to get through my introduction, then everything improves after that. It's great to see a lovely small select gathering like this. You notice I made people actually apply to attend because originally the idea was for quite a small and completely private event, but I thought it would be nice to broaden it out a bit, but not too much, not to try and... so this is the kind of creme de la creme. So what I want to do is, I'll just give you a little bit of context, and then Mike Molasky will give some different context from the Japanese perspective. So the funding for this, and the reason we're having these events, is because a couple of years ago I secured funding to set up a martial arts studies research network, which is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is one of the main funders for this kind of thing in the UK. And this follows on from the first... This all started in, well, from my perspective, trying to make people get together and publicise martial arts studies in the UK. Started when I had what I thought would be quite a small conference in Cardiff in 2015, and it turned out to be really quite a decent size. And people came from all over the world, like Japan and the States and Hong Kong and China and all over the place, and Europe. It was great. So I thought this really was something. This had legs. At the same time, we set up the academic journal that most of you probably know something about, martial arts studies, which is online, open access. And yeah, so that's in the wake of this kind of work. Then we got the AHRC funding, this is a presentation I've done before, haven't I? It's got longer since the last time you guys saw it. So the primary objective of the Martial Arts Studies Research Network is to connect or disconnect the disciplinary and cultural discourses on martial arts by fostering dialogue through cross-disciplinary events, which this is a cross-disciplinary event. In connecting and engaging diverse researchers, the network will develop knowledge of the significance impact of martial arts in the contemporary world and set the agenda for future research in the interlocking multidisciplinary field around them. So this kind of, if you want to secure funding from the AHRC, you need a paragraph like this. Yeah? This is the kind of paragraph that really goes down well. And I also work with the publishers Rowman and Littlefield International, and we've set up a martial arts studies book series. So if anyone is working on a monograph or indeed an edited collection in English, then just more people coming in. Then let me know, because we're very interested in that. The first event was organised by Alex Channon, and that was in the University of Brighton in February 16, and that was on gender issues in theory and practice, and that was a really great success. The second event that we held was on martial arts cinema in April 2016 at Birmingham City University. Then we had the second conference last July in Cardiff again. They've all been in Cardiff so far. And the one that I tragically missed, an event that I organised with Ben Spatz at Huddersfield, which was about the connections between mindfulness, because mindfulness is incredibly fashionable, isn't it, nowadays? But the relationships between that and kind of different sort of martial traditions are quite interesting, and I was absolutely devastated to miss that. But there you go, such is life. This is the fourth official event. So this is new research on Japanese martial arts from inside Japan and out. And originally it was just going to be a small research group of scholars from Japan getting together, but we broadened it out further. I think Mike Molasky is going to say something about that in a moment. Shortly, the next thing for this year, and probably the last thing that we'll really have the funding for, will be the Martial Arts Studies Conference in Cardiff in July. And then the AHRC funding I think, runs out. Hopefully, I'm hoping to have spent it all. And if I haven't spent it all, then I'll organise some kind of closing party or something. I don't know. We'll work on that next. So the future, I am currently in the process of applying for lots more money to do lots more interesting things, to make interesting kind of interdisciplinary and public-facing events happen. But really, that's the context. And here we are today, and I think at this point I would invite Mike to say a few words, if that's okay.
My high tech, the last of the Luddites. First, thanks to Paul, who did 99.87% of all the organizing, but was magnanimous enough to share the glory, as it were. So, on the Japan side, this really began with a grant that I applied for to the Suntory Foundation, which has a one-year grant for organizing a group of scholars from different fields to pursue a particular topic. So it's interdisciplinary, and interdisciplinary work, while it's had a cachet in Europe and the US for quite a while, it's still relatively under-recognized in terms of institutional support in Japan. And the Suntory Foundation is private. You know, they make whiskey and beer and good stuff like that. So they're not bound by a lot of the governmental constraints that Japanese government grants are. And in Japan, I had taught in the United States for nearly 20 years and moved to Japanese universities and quickly found out that there are two things about grant writing in Japan that are very challenging. One is that they're primarily group-oriented rather than individual. And people like me who are basically loners find that a little bit challenging. And the other thing is the format has all these boxes. There are all these little compartments. And you've got to fit a certain number of lines. And you can only indent a certain number of times. And if you go over that number of lines, they disappear beneath the bottom of the box. And then you've got to figure out how to get it back. So you spend half of your time formatting. And half your time thinking about what you want to say. So anyway, the Suntory Foundation was much looser about all this kind of thing, and that was nice. So we got 1 year's funding to bring together people from different fields who are working to some degree on martial arts, and I'm the least experienced of everyone in the group. And I wanted to bring Paul in because at least my impression of martial arts studies in Japan has been that it's kind of insular, frankly, and that most people are working on Japanese martial arts, and most people are working from either sociology of sport or history of sport, maybe anthropology of sport, but very little work in the humanities. And so there doesn't seem to be that kind of a potentially productive interaction. And so I thought this might be the one time that I ever in my entire life apply for a group grant to do something selfless and maybe lead to some productive dialogue. And that was really the purpose. And that group, the Suntory grant was successful, and you can extend it by 1 year. So this is the second year. And we had Paul come last year, and we were actually planning to invite him again this year, but he said, the timing wasn't great. Maybe we can do something here. And here we are. So my hope is that today, for many of the scholars from Japan who've been at this and are very knowledgeable and read these extremely difficult, in some cases, materials written in classical Japanese that are extremely difficult, will be able to share their knowledge with you and then benefit from your knowledge as well. And it'll just be a really friendly and open and mutually stimulating event. And if it leads to further research in that regard, then I personally will consider it a success. So one other thing, though, some of our scholars from Japan are very comfortable in English and work in English, and some don't have much experience. So I do ask your patience in that regard. Otherwise, we had thought about actually having people present in Japanese and do interpreting, which is what we did when Paul came. But that doubles the time. Somebody says something and then you have the interpreter and then you go back and forth, and it really is not the most efficient way. So for those who have difficulty speaking and for those who might have difficulty understanding, I request your mutual patience as we endeavor to understand one another. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. One last thing that I wanted to add is that our intentions for this day include the fact that this is sort of a working group workshop idea, because we're hoping to develop, anyone who wants to take this forward, develop these presentations into articles that we'll publish in the journal Martial Arts Studies. That's the plan. No one is contractually obliged to publish in the journal, but this is the idea, that we develop these presentations. Anyone who's interested, we develop them for publication at some point in the relatively near future. So, what time is it? Oh, should we start? Do you start early? Does one ever start early?
Why not?
We could just start early. Yes, you should be here by now, shouldn't you? If you're coming, you should be here by now. Well, we'll start early then.